Hello and welcome to the Artisan School, where we talk Pianocraft, we geek out, and we stress out together. We stress out together primarily with certain things of the piano, and specifically the damper assembly. The damper assembly is what technicians have said to me. And let's be real. There are certain elements of the job of Pianocraft that are easier than others, that are more enjoyable than others, but I have not yet met a technician that says, my favorite part about my craft is doing damper work. I've never met that person. Jacob, you might have. We're joined today with Stacy, Coburn, and Jacob, our instructors from the Artisan School. Have you ever heard of a technician that's like, hey, you want to know a secret? This is my passion. Coburn, don't pull a fast one over me. Maybe Coburn's like secretly like, it's me.
I like doing dampers to make them consistent, but I just don't like doing them in general. If I'm going to do them, I'm going to do them.
Yeah, exactly. I've split this over, and that might be a little bit much, but I split this over 2 to 3 sessions. Just so that people can kind of walk it out and play around with this. But there's really 3 core things that we want to go through. And starting with today, we want to start with our pre-regulation of the dampers. So our pre-regulation, then we move into our overall lift, and then we move into our timing. Now, sometimes we have to mix these up a little bit, the timing versus the overall lift. And let me talk about what I mean. Oh no, hold on just a second. So when we're talking about, did I lose you?
Your camera's frozen.
Okay, hold on just a second. We're gonna get this. Can you see my camera now?
No. I'm so sorry. Not yet. We got a good angle on your the side of your hair though. Oh, he's gone. He'll be back. Oh, cliffhanger. Coburn, it's good to see you this morning. Oh,
thanks. Sorry, I'm a little late.
You're good. See ya. I'm echoing. Mute me.
Yeah, I'm gonna get this back. You know, it's one of those things that if you were to tell me 10 years ago,
froze again. It's just one of those technology days, guys. I haven't had internet for almost 24 hours. I'm at my parents' house right now. I literally had to sneak over here. They said a tower was down. I was like, great.
Well, I can ask a question to Jacob and Coburn. Have you ever adjusted a spoon, taking the action out in an upright to adjust the spoon, or do you always adjust that with the action in?
In.
I always do it in.
In. Right?
In the piano. Alan was showing me a way to do it outside, and I just do it in.
Can you ever just kind of tilt it back instead of, kind of reach back there, or do you do it from the front?
Robert, you just got to get a different tool, man. It's
I didn't touch it. I had a damper that it was F sharp too, and everything was great except for that one note. It played, but it wouldn't sustain when you held the note down. I thought, I've never adjusted one from the front. I don't want to make it worse. I kind of left it there. The piano, I tuned it, and I adjusted one other damper, but I thought, oh man, I need to kind of figure this out, because I knew it was a spoon issue.
Yeah.
It wasn't coming off enough, but anyhow, I didn't want to take the action out. I thought, I'm going to make it worse.
Yeah, I've seen someone talk about doing it out of the thing, but I don't see how you can do that without the extra parts of the action connected. You can't do it really accurately, at least. So I don't know.
Yeah, then you got to put the pedal rods back in and all that. It's just a mess.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I left frustrated that I could not fix that note, but I thought, I'm not going to go down a road that I've not traveled yet. So that's where I left it.
Yeah. Have you ever had a spoon drop through the whipping or come unglued? Yeah.
I'm so sorry if that happened to you.
Yeah,
That
I was gonna
sounds
say I had a
terrible.
spoon outside of the action because of that, because it like just fell through the whip in. I'm not all the way through. And then
That's terrible.
It was really weird. It took me forever to figure out because like how often does that happen?
I've never heard of that happening. What did you do? How did you fix that?
I just put a little bit of glue at the base of it. I was able to pull it out of the whip in, put some glue, and then I put it back, and that worked.
That's good.
I mean, it's been fine since. I've seen the piano again, so.
I have a question that came up this
Nice.
week since we're waiting for David. Okay, you know the decals, how they'll
Michael.
peel up, you know?
Yeah.
What I mean is the best thing to just kind of like sand the edges down, but then it looks terrible. Like, what do you guys do when that happens? Like when it's like literally peeling up. I mean, what do you guys do in that case? No one's saying anything.
I haven't had one.
I avoid it.
I don't know.
Never happened to me.
Okay.
I've seen people glue it back.
David, I can't hear you. I'm so sorry. It's just like, okay, so my tech.
I'm gonna throw it to Cobran because I bet he has a good answer.
Daniel ran into this week, and he was like, well, he it just looked bad in the end, you know, because the decal was then like half rubbed off. He's like, is this the best I can do? And I said, yeah, but I didn't know if it is the best, you know, like if it's like hitting the strings and yeah.
I think people glue them back. I don't know how long that lasts, but I've seen it work okay.
You've done that?
I've never done it myself. I've seen some other people do it. I need to try it myself though. I've been waiting to find another piano like that because I want to try it. But I've heard it works okay. I guess it's just gonna depend on what kind of glue you're using. And
I know. I was like, what do you use? Mod Podge? I mean, I guess you guys have all sorts of glue, so one of them would work.
I've only seen it twice that it was bad enough. The customer mentioned something about it.
Yeah.
And at that point, they had already tried tackling the issue themselves. So the decal's already torn up a little bit. And in that case, I don't see the reason to salvage it because it's not going to look good glued back down with parts of it already torn off. So I let them know. I said, well, I can peel off most of it and whatever's still left behind will still be stuck to the soundboard. Is that fine? It's not going to look any better than it is now because you're still going to have shards of the decal glued to the soundboard. I said, yeah, that's fine. So then I'll just rip up the rest, use the Spurlock and Supply 88 cleaning tools to kind of scrape it up. And then whatever's still on the soundboard, I'll just leave there.
That I think you're right. Cobran is just having that conversation with the customer before you be like, it's going to look out.
That's exactly what I did, Cobran.
Right. Yeah. I guess that's
kind of like,
answer, right?
This is all we can do. It's already kind of breaking. It's not going to look good, even if it gets glued back.
Right. No, that's right. Just have the
you're absolutely right.
It always ends
Talking
up
to the
that.
customer.
I go through this all the time, you guys, and then in the end, I'm like, wait, no, just tell the customer what you're telling me, like all those things, like solution. So
Robert, going back to the spoons though, especially if it's just one, you should try it. You should just try it. That's the only way that you're gonna like get experience is getting your hands and knowing how that feels. Once you kind of understand which direction to go, it really is just a matter of getting a feel for how to bend that spoon.
Yeah, I agree. I've got an upright action here on the cradle in front of me to practice. I just need a little more confidence to do it in house. But yeah, you're right, and I think I need to get that tool, that different tool, rather than the traditional one with the little hook shape.
Yeah, the little Lego hand one.
Yeah. I need the Japanese one. I think David said I need to get. Hey,
can you hear me?
We can hear you.
We can hear and see you. We just had a great discussion, but back to you.
Welcome everybody to the Artisan School. We're going to be talking about damper work right now, starting right now. Not over the last 10 minutes. Pre-work. pre-damper work is going to be essential, but before you do that, you need to have a handful of tools. And you know me, I'm more minimalist in the amount of tools that I have. So I always have a long-handled flathead screwdriver. And I think this is like, I don't know, 9 or 10 inch. I don't know. It's probably only an 8 inch. I don't know. But a longer, just a flathead screwdriver, because we want to go down inside, in a lot of cases, down in between and tighten or loosen this damper lever. The other thing we want to have on hand, because during the process of adjusting the damper wires and spacing, aligning, doing stuff, you inevitably, especially with the old uprights, knock out those hammer return springs. It's like all the time. You'll go through, you do all your work, and then you'll have to put those back. Your Heart spring tool is an awesome tool for that. And so I always will just have these out. And again, I will have these like on a piece of aged tan leather on top of a little rollout on top of the piano, because doing dampers, I want to be near my happy place, which is these textures, metal, steel, leather. And so I usually will have something like that just to kind of calm me down, because it still is that. This is controversial, and a lot of people don't like this tool, but I absolutely love this tool. This is the multi-angle wire bending tool. And the reason I love it is because I can go straight in to do my wire bending from left to right, or I can come at an angle and do that, because it has multiple angles right here. Now, what a lot of people say is, no, I like to have 3 different combo handles with the 3 different angles. And I'm like, that's fine. You're wrong, but no, but I just like to have the one.
Yeah, I was going to say, what is controversial about having that? Okay, I get it now.
They say, a lot of people say, because of the head stock right here, the head is a little bit larger, a little bit bulkier. They say that you can't get in between things as easily, which there's some amount of truth to it. But boy, if I have to go back and forth, I just love having that single tool. Those are available at Shaft. I use solely for spoons one of these guys. And so this one is a little bit shorter. Usually they're a little taller, but this one is what I use for spoons. And I know, Robert, last week you kind of showed the one that I started with. You have that in front of you? Yeah, that one. I feel like that's what everybody gets, a lot of technicians get introduced to, and it exasperates the problem of already being stressed out about damper, spoons bending. Would you say that's true, Jacob?
Absolutely, yes. And I had the opportunity of, getting a lot of experience in the rebuilding shop with all of those tools. So I got to figure out what I liked, and very quickly I figured out that I did not like that one.
Yeah.
There's like a few cases that I go, oh, it would have been nice if I had that one. But that's out of hundreds of pianos, right? Like, nah, most of the time you never need that one. It makes it worse. It makes it a horrible experience.
I totally agree.
Cobra, what are your thoughts? You've been doing a lot of pianos over the years.
A few PTG meetings, I got to grab some extra tools from technicians that were either deceased or no longer working. And so I think I have 4 different shaped, different sized, different angled damper spoon tools. And it's nice having them on hand, because each piano is going to be slightly different. And so to be able to quickly try all 4 of them, see, oh, this one works better for this one, and then try another one on a different one. Oh, this one's going to work better for this one.
Yeah.
You heard it. You need 4 of them now. More tools.
The last thing that I'll have on hand, this is just good to have in your kit, but sometimes with the older uprights, you're going to need to do some work, including replacing felt. And so having some amount of this stuff on hand, again, I always thought these things looked like, those rounds, like in a Gatling gun or like machine gun, you know. I always would get them and I'm like, oh man, we're going in. I don't know. But, you know, having just some amount of these is good to have on hand, as well as just your flat felts. And because some of the pre-work that we're going to be doing or looking at is just, is all the damper felt in fairly good shape? And what I mean by that is it crusty? Does it have sponginess to it? Are the dampers clicking because there's some residue or something on that? And I've had so many times where the majority of it, this happened just the other day, the majority of all the dampers were fine, but this one was clicking every time it would rebound and hit the string because there was something that had gotten spilled on it. And I almost wonder sometimes if that's a technician error, if maybe they lacquered the hammers and then just, because it looked like nothing was out of place. Didn't look like something had spilled on it, but for whatever reason, that one top portion of that damper felt was super rigid hard. And so just replacing that felt as you go.
I sometimes see, well, I always wonder, but sometimes you see people put candles or lance on their uprights, and it's right on top of that contiguous hinge. And I feel like that lines up really well with the dampers. And so when something drips down, it kind of drips right on the dampers, and that's where you get some problems.
That's a good point. And it only takes a couple drops of something weird to mess up stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Those will be the tools that I have on hand for the damper work. For the most part, if I'm regulating an action, I save the damper work to the end. I'm kind of like, I want a nice big old win of having all the rest of the action regulated. Now, of course, if there's an issue, I'll address that right away. I would say that so many times, a lot of times the dampers are not silencing the strings properly because of a small adjustment. And so a lot of times that small adjustment is actually just in the damper sustain pedal. So if that pedal if there's not any lost motion, there's no lost motion, then those damper levers will just slightly, so that you have this rod right here that goes continually all the way through the action. And if that pedal is adjusted too high, that rod will be lifting these dampers just slightly. It doesn't have to be much. And what you'll notice is like, wow, this section is okay, but I hear something. And it usually is not one full-on ringing out. It's just, that's not as quiet as I feel like they should be. And what I did a couple times early on is I didn't check that. I went through the entire process of regulating my dampers. I respaced them. I did the timing. I did the lift. And you would think, David, if you're doing the lift, how are you not noticing that they're lifting immediately as you feather the pedal? I don't know. I didn't. And so I got done with the entire thing. And then my mentor came in. He's like, hey, did you adjust the pedal? I'm like, no. So he adjusted that. And then I had to redo everything all over again. So make sure that one of the first things that you do is give yourself a little lost motion in that pedal, just right away. So questions about that? Does everybody know what I'm talking about? That right there.
David, remind me, what you consider the amount of lost motion on the pedals.
So I like it almost feels like 1/8 of an inch, but I visually have to look at the dampers while I'm doing it, because I could feel like, okay, I'm feeling it's going down before it engages that rod system in the back, and I feel like there's space, but I want to look down in there and check to see if what I'm feeling is accurate. Because I've done this before where I'm like, oh yeah, there's plenty of space. There's maybe a little bit too much, and I go in there, I'm like, no, they're lifting. There's something kind of a barrier. There's something happening where it's not a consistency between what I'm feeling here and what I'm visually seeing those dampers lifting.
Yeah, because the reason why I asked is, to your point, I've seen it where, you have lost motion, you press the pedal, but it still triggers later than you want because there might be extra, padding, adding the pedal rod to the damper rod assembly, and it's giving more lost motion because that felt is compressing.
Yep. You're going to run across pianos that we're talking about kind of this continuous rod. Hold on just a second, and I can kind of show you. So this is the damper. Trying to, you have the dowel, that goes from the pedal trap work all the way through, and it hits the action right here. So the pedal is down here. There has this rod. It comes all the way through here, and boom, lifts these dampers. So I love these actions. Thank you, Rayburn Piano Works, for giving us these actions. But this just kind of shows you. So we have the rod that goes from the bottom of the pedal board and the trap work, and it goes and it hits this little pivoting mechanism. Can anybody tell me, because I don't think it's called the damper pivot rod, but the name of this rod right here?
Damper lift rod. That's what I've been calling it for a while.
Too, but I just want to make sure.
Yeah, and I've heard it as damper hanger.
Ooh, damper hanger. I've heard these as damper hangers. So
yeah, the whole thing.
So making sure that there's that lost motion. And what I was going to say is that you're going to run across pianos that they will have a 2-part rod system. So they will have, usually you'll see this with consoles, where the middle pedal will lift the bass dampers, and the far right, the same pedal, will lift all the dampers. This can be fine, or this can be horrible. Jake is laughing, because what happens is what we want is you have these 2 rods. So this is the long one, this is the shorter one, and they overlap each other in a way so that, okay, here's the bass damper ones, and then here's the overall. So you can see how they hug each other, and if you want to do the overall damping, this larger rod pushes against the bass sustain rod, and then everything moves. If these are not meeting properly, if where they connect, and they should have some kind of felt or leather, has been worn, or there's some issue, that will throw off the timing of one or the other. So, Jacob,
you said it perfectly. It's either great or it's awful. When it works, it works. When it doesn't, it doesn't. Yeah, the split creates another point of failure, and I don't know if I like that.
That's a great way of saying it. It's the other point of failure. So this is part of that pre-work that we're doing, is evaluating, okay, if this is a console with this 2-part system, if I do the damper pedal, are all of them lifting, is the bass and the treble tenor lifting fairly evenly? Or is it like, wow, what you will see if it's not working is the 2 of the 3 sections, the tenor and the treble section, are lifting and the bass is not. So in those situations, you're going to need to go ahead and add some kind of a spacer between the 2 rods where they connect so that they lift evenly together. So that's something that you're going to need to evaluate. That's not terribly common. It's not like an everyday, all the time thing, but that is something that no matter how much regulation of the dampers you do, that will be an issue. Relating to this rod, there's several other things you need to know. These are prone to squeak and make sounds over time, especially with these old uprights. So a lot of times what you have to do is remove the damper levers to access the screw, pull it out, and put some super lube. Now you can just squirt some Protec lubrication in there, and I found that works well too. But these points are prone to squeaking and making sounds. Unfortunately, they can also be prone to breaking. And that, my friends, is not a fun fix. So what I'm talking about is this little swing arm that comes out of here. can break. Usually I found that it breaks right at the base where that rod connects to that swing arm. And what I've done in the past, it goes from, hey, I can fix some of the lift and timing, gives me an hour, I'll fix it, to no, this just became a 1 or 2 day project. And I'm not telling you, this is just so that you know all the things. And again, we're writing this course. We're writing a super course. What is it Trump saying right now? Big, beautiful bill. We're writing a big, beautiful course. But no, this is going to be good. And we're writing this course, and there's so many little things like this that, to be honest, I wish more people knew about, just not to stress you out, but just to know more. And that's what we're doing in the Artisan School course, is this kind of stuff, so we can explain it and at least give people an idea of what to know. The repair for this, go ahead, Jacob.
I was just gonna say, yeah, this is one of those things that you won't see very often. Mm-hmm. So like, know where to file that away and where to come back to it. That's the point of this. We're not trying to stress you out, but know that there is a resource out there to help you. So, yeah.
And that's another reason why we wanted to make it so that we're meeting 3 days a week with the school and with coaches and stuff like that, because you will run into stuff like that. The repair for this, for what I have done in the past, and I'm very curious to see what Jacob says to this, is I have sanded. So what I've done is I've sanded this flush. So a lot of times there's a little bit of a nub for where it broke. And then what I do is I drill out and then I put a nail through it, and then I bend it over, make it sure it's just snug enough, push it through, bend it to the right thing, and then call it good. Is that what you've done in the past, or what have you done?
No, but I like that method. Actually, that sounds pretty solid. Okay.
That's the method I've used in the past. In 25 years, I've maybe done it 4 times. It gives you some perspective. It's not something that you do a lot.
So you're finding a nail that's pretty much the same width as that, so you don't have to worry about changing bushings or anything.
Nope.
That's great. Yeah. No, that's a great fix. That's
make
great.
Sure that when you're drilling that, you're using a drill press and that you're getting it in line, squared with the other ones, because you don't want your one arm to be like off to the side, because that will throw off the lift. I know it sounds like a lot, but we want to just paint you the whole picture of all the things that could be. But the vast majority will not need anything like what we've talked about right here. But it's good to know what you're looking for, because the worst thing is being frustrated and not know what is even going on or what to look for. That's the worst. So we've evaluated, we've done some of our pre-work. We've checked to make sure that the felts are all nice and spongy. They seem to be working. There's lost motion in the pedal. It looks like the pivot rod is nice and working. I don't hear any squeaks. Everything is good to go there. From here, what I like to do is just start to feather the pedal more to see what does our timing look like. And then I'll also go through each key that have a damper associated with it and see when in the keystroke, when is it lifting that damper? Just as a basic idea. Am I saying that they're lifting way late, way too early? With an old upright, a lot of times they're lifting late. Can anybody tell me why?
I think it'd be the compression of the felt behind the spoons, as well as capstan lost motion. Once you adjust that capstan, then the damper timing changes from the key.
I think that's exactly right. Coburn hit it right on the head. And I found that it's the majority of it, it's that felt right there. So the felt in the back of that underlever where it meets the spoon has been compressed. And so it's later on in the keystroke. Now, we want to be careful, because that I find that I like the dampers to lift later on in the keystroke for my own, what I like to feel. I know that the spec is usually 1/3 to 1/2 the keystroke, or as the hammer gets closer to the string. The industry spec is 1/3 to 1/2, but honestly, I like to have it lift at 2/3, because I don't want to feel that into the final end of the keystroke. That's me, and you just have to kind of decide that for yourself. But this is the time where we're starting to see, okay, what are we working with? The next thing that we're going to do after we've inspected everything, we've tightened down the screws, the flange screws for the levers, we're going to go ahead and start using our multi-angle tool. And what we're going to be doing, and you're going to do it from this side. Whoa. And again, on Monday, I'll have these cameras dialed in. I thought they were dialed in, and then I went and pushed a button and everything started smoking. We're going to start spacing these dampers to the strings. Caveat. You may be working on an old upright piano that has mated to those strings over the last century and a half, and you may not want to mess with the spacing too much. So with an older upright that has had those string indentations really formed with those dampers, you may not want to do too much aligning and spacing from where it's at. Does that make sense? And just because it doesn't take too much to where now that damper doesn't work because it's not mated with where it used to be to the string. Coburn, what do you think?
I say with any piano, any age, with dampers, less is more, but especially those that have been highly worn in, like older ones. If it's working, don't mess with it.
Yeah.
Even if the alignment is off or things are lifting a little bit different, make the minimal amount of adjustment possible.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Because damper work, one little movement usually affects something else as far as its ability to sustain or silence the string. So I totally agree with Cobra, and less is more. And so a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is situations where maybe it's a newer piano and you're kind of wanting to dial in everything. And here's all the principles. Maybe that's a better way of saying, here's the principles and tools and techniques around everything. And you will have to decide whether you're going to employ these for the particular situation you're working with. I like using this tool to just space the dampers to the strings. And what I'm doing with this is I'm coming through, usually at this point, there we go, underneath the rest rail, coming through, and just pivoting them left or right. And so I might be doing it at the base initially to get my overall pivoted over, and then I square it back off at the head. Before you do this, make sure that these damper lever flanges are not plastic. Make sure that there is no plastic in this assembly. One of the biggest crap moments of Artisan Piano Services was early on, and one of our technicians, he's a great tech, but he was learning. He's off and doing his own thing now. He's amazing. But early on, he said, hey, I broke something. I need to bring it back. And he brings this action back. And I kid you not, the whipping flanges, the damper lever flanges, the damper itself was all plastic. The damper lever, it was all plastic. Everything was plastic. And he had unfortunately broken about a dozen different things. And he was like, well, maybe I can just replace one or the. We ended up having to go from a quick, I'm going to help you fix this, to a $5,000 3-4 week project that we ate entirely. Because guess what? It was fine before he came. This is meant to scare you into just checking this. Because after that moment in time, we now are very careful about what we do before we get started. Because if there is plastic, there is going to be breaking.
So David, I actually ran across a console that had the plastic flanges for the dampers. And, the dampers were already broken, so I actually pulled the action to be able to remove those dampers that were binding stuff up, and there was 8 to 10 of those that were actually already broken. And I told the customer that, hey, because these were plastic, the other ones are liable to be breaking in the future. Would your recommendation to say, to the customer to replace all of those flanges with wooden flanges and quote the full job of replacing all of those plastic parts?
All day, absolutely. And if there's one area of plastic, there's probably another. So before you quote that just the damper lever flanges, check to see if the whipping flanges, the hammer flanges, make sure there's no other plastic first.
I didn't see any, but I would need to reevaluate that before tackling the job.
Absolutely. But yes, I would 100% just swap those out with wooden flanges. For us, that's probably a $1,500 plus job. That is not a fun job. That'll push you.
Yeah, that's why when I saw that they were plastic, I'm like, I already knew that was going to be a lot bigger from our previous discussions other times.
Yep. So go ahead, Coburn.
I hear it's the hardening agent that they use in the plastic molds that it just keeps hardening. And here we are decades later, and they're still getting stiffer. The hardening agent's still hardening the plastic.
Ooh, that's interesting. I've always wondered what it is.
Yeah, plastic
so
was
I'm
young.
Assuming
was new.
Yeah, I'm assuming the plastic nowadays, the hardening agent isn't still curing, or shouldn't still be curing the next 50 years.
Yeah,
like the older plastic.
Yeah, because plastic is a broad term. It means combination of a lot of different chemicals, and so it really is. It can be a lot of different things, right? So they were figuring out what was working, and that there's a reason why they don't do that anymore.
Flange osteoporosis.
Nice.
Going back to those damper flanges, I think making sure that they're all tight, the screws are tight beforehand would be good. But again, being very careful to make sure that they don't move as you're tightening them, because then that will mess up the damper timing. Once you try to move it, it'll rotate a little bit. So you think you're doing a good thing, tightening them all, and then you just messed up the entire piano of damper timing and spacing and alignment and rotation.
Yep. And then also using a fine flathead screwdriver is a good idea, because I have done this before where I had a wider one. And I go down in there and I start to tighten, and I break a couple of the lever springs because they're close to that base, right at the base of that area. And so just making sure it's thin enough to go down there to tighten everything up. Just a nice little turn. We have regulated or done a preliminary regulation of our damper sustain pedal. We made sure there's lost motion, that those dampers are not all moving too soon. We've checked that damper kind of pivot lift rod, make sure it's not squeaking. We've lubricated these areas. We can see that there's not a bend or any breaking of the rod or the swing arms right here. All that's good. We've tightened all of the damper lever flange screws, and then now we've kind of gone through and just did some spacing, because for this piano we decided to do some spacing. Again, what I use is this tool right here. It has the multiple angles come in through. I usually will do a turn on the base and then on the head. Very similar. So a lot of times when we're bending wires, we're doing the same methodology. So back check wires is a similar thing, where we're moving at the base and squaring back up at the top. So again, the primary movement is down at the base to move the whole thing over. But usually when you do that, it's off to the side. So then when you do the final movement towards the base, it's moving it back straight. You're also making sure that none of the parts are made of plastic, because this is during the time where you'll start to break those parts if they are.
I have a question. on, looks like you're moving left to right on the, with this tool. If you need to move it front to back, are you going to come in between the hammers above the rest rail, or in front of the hammers, between the hammers and the
Good question.
rail?
So that's going to be when we're adjusting our overall lift. And what I do is just come from this angle so you can see. I will come in between the hammers like this. So as you can see there, to get it. So usually I'm about 4 hammers over from the point where I'm wanting to bend in or out.
So similar to how you use a Paps mute and you come in a
Yes.
few hammers over.
Yes.
So you're still below the rest rail, not above it.
Usually, that's
okay.
right. That's I'm usually doing that exactly. And that's my system, or that's the way I've done it. Jake, I'm curious about you. If you go under, same with you, Cobra. Are you going underneath the rail or over it?
I prefer under, if I can.
I'll use one of those and then a screwdriver as well to either push the damper towards the strings or flip it and push the bottom towards the strings. So a double leverage, a little bit more accurate.
Yeah. And now that we're saying that, you kind of brought up another point. Making sure these are the the rounds or mounds, and making sure that these are tight as well. So there's a little screw, making sure that that screw is nice and snug so that we don't have this happening. And so that's part of your spacing and aligning process, is making sure all of these heads themselves are squared off and to the strings themselves is important.
Just not super tight to where you mess it up.
Yeah, exactly. And so yeah.
So David, if you look at the heads themselves, if they're too low on the wire, for example, are you doing that early on in your sequence as far as making sure everything's level in those dampers?
It depends if there's a weird outlier. But back to what Coburn said, if something's working, a lot of times I don't mess with it, even if it's a little lower or higher. But if something's not working right, or it's just bugging me, my OCD's kicking in, I might do it at this time, in the process during this preliminary stuff. But yeah, all of this pre-work. And so, in our course, we talk about, when you're doing a regulation, most people don't talk about all the pre-work that you need to do before you fully start to regulate. And so that's what we're trying to really instill in everybody here, is all this preliminary stuff before you do kind of this is the appetizer stuff before your main course. And this is very important, and makes the actual work so much easier and accurate. But most times people skip over these initial steps and just go for it.
There's one thing I'd like to add on lubrication, 2 different things on the damper lift rod that goes to the entire piano. Is I'll either, if it's really tarnished, like it's a 75 to 100-year-old piano, might take the whole thing out, put some Flitz polish on there, wipe it off with a microfiber cloth. If it's really bad, I may even use the blue, the soft Scotch-Brite pad to smooth it down a little bit with the Flitz polish. And then once I clean that off, I'll coat it with McLube. Or if it's not too bad, I'll leave the entire rod in the piano, just flip the action around, put it on a table, and then push all the levers down, and then spray McLube on the spoons and the damper rod at the same time, or TFL 50 wet spray if I feel it needs a little bit more.
Yes to all that. And Cobra, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the times that is required on pianos that have been dormant, not played in a long time, because that rod has, right where the damper lever cushions are touching, it's usually still pretty clean, right at the exact point. But if it's not been played very much, then it will have corrosion or tarnishing everywhere around except for where that touches. And so that can make a squeaking sound or rubbing sound.
That would make sense to me. I just notice it whenever I'm pressing the damper pedal. If I kind of feel a little bit of resistance and then just hear a, then I know that's just like 56 dampers that are doing that against the rod. And it's like, that does not feel or sound good.
Another thing to keep in mind is you may need to put a little bit of lubrication on this spring right where it meets and goes in its kind of hole there. Jacob, were you going to say something too? Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna agree. I do think it's the friction that's cleaning that damper lift rod.
Yeah. So by this time, this is all that preliminary work now that we've spaced everything, we've tightened everything, lubricated everything, and now we're at the point where we're like, okay, we can, do the deep dive into the next portion, which is going to be the overall lift, which is what we're going to be talking about on Monday. But this is at least the starting point to where, okay, I know that I've checked off all of these things and now I can confidently go into the overall lift. And because I've done all this work, I know that things will work out. They should work out in the next portion of doing this. Questions before? Yeah.
Have you ever had to lower damper heads after installing new hammer heads?
Because the felt is too tall?
Yes. I'm sorry. The hammerheads, the new hammerheads are too fat, and so now they're hitting the top of the damper head or the damper block.
Yeah, I've had to do that. Yes, I had to do that a couple times. I'm super intense when it comes to me hanging, installing hammerheads. And so I've done that a couple times. And so since then, I raise or tilt the rake angle of that hammer when I'm installing it so that I just make sure that that's not happening. Usually if it's going to happen, it's going to happen in the base is what I found that it will touch somewhere over there.
Okay. Yeah. The last that I hung in the low tenor section, like 4 or 5 of them were sticking, and it took me forever to figure out what it was. I couldn't realize it, or I couldn't see that they were hitting it, and finally I figured it out. But then I moved the damper heads down, but I didn't want to start messing with the damper timing and everything else, so I kind of just left it, and it worked okay, but I may go back and mess with it. But they were working okay, so that's why I'm like, they still work okay after moving them down a little bit.
So you're saying, Victor, that the bottom of the hammer right here was touching the top of this?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that definitely has happened. That can definitely happen. Or another thing that can happen is, and this happens in the base because those hammers are at an angle. If that angle isn't exactly right, as it goes into striking, can you hear that train? Jeez, sorry. As it goes to touch the string, hit the string, if it's not spaced just right, it can hit a neighboring damper head. And so that happens a lot too, is what I've done.
Or neighboring hammers.
Yeah.
That's why I'm in favor of straight strung pianos.
Yes. Dampers. You know how there's so many things. It's like, you almost kind of check it off the list. Okay, I've done some key bushing replacement. Got it. I've surfaced hammers. I've repinned things. This is actually a big one. It's like I know what to do. I've done it. I'm fairly proficient at the upright dampers. Once you can do that, there's a level of peace and confidence that you feel when that happens. And Victor, you're shaking your head like, yeah, when you know it, you know it.
There is one preliminary step I kind of hinted to, and I think that's adjusting lost motion, because on an upright piano, the spoons are attached to the whippen, whereas on a grand, the spoons are not attached to the whippen. So adjusting a capstans on a grand, you're not messing with damper timing. But adjusting capstans on an upright, you are messing with damper timing to the end of the key.
Mhm.
So I say having all the lost motion adjusted before, really starting nitpicking on damper timing is crucial.
Absolutely, and
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree.
and your blow distance is, you know, as so that's, I think that's another reason I like to do the dampers, upright dampers at the very end of the regulation, because my blow distance is finally accurate. I like this, and that might be, now that I've changed that blow distance, wow, these are not lifting, these are lifting way too late or way too early, you know, whatever it may be. So yeah, that's a great point, is making sure that that lost motion is done. I would say making sure the vast majority of the regulation is done is not a bad idea. You know,
Yeah, I
you're
do it at the end too.
yeah. Questions about everything, anything that we've covered here so far? Because next week we're going to dive full on into the overall lift, and I'll probably be doing this on an actual upright, as well as we'll have the model too. We'll see. We'll see. Lofty goals with this equipment.
I'm interested in hearing more about what do you think of the lever, or more time you spend with it. You said you didn't spend too much time with it, right?
Thank you, everybody, for joining.